All right, so this morning we're going to be starting with the leadership panel. And as I said before, my name is Maxwell McCoy. I represent the OBAP chapter here on campus. I'll be moderating. We've got some awesome panelists. Thank you to all of you for being here. It's really awesome. You're kind of volunteering your time, and we really appreciate it. So each of you represent leadership teams from national aviation organizations. And I'm super excited to get into our conversation today. We'll have an opportunity for questions at the end, so if you have any, hold on to them. So we'll start by letting each of you introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your background and your position with your organization.
Hi, I'm Allison McKay. I am the CEO of Women in Aviation International. I've spent my entire career in aviation, although I don't fly or fix. I have come up through the support ranks of aviation organizations through sales and marketing and government affairs.
Hi, my name is Claudia Zapata-Cardone. I'm a captain at United Airlines on the Airbus 320. I am the vice president of the Latino Pilots Association, and I'm the president-elect. I'll be taking over in January for the Latino Pilots Association. My aviation journey started when I was a child. My dad started working at the Newark airport when I was very young, and we would take him dinner most evenings because my dad did not like American food. He was an immigrant from Colombia, so my poor mom had to work and then come home, make him dinner, and we would take him dinner most evenings at the airport, where I got to sit in the back seat and watch the airplanes take off and land. So I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Gambino. I'm the president for NGPA, the worldwide LGBTQ aviation community. I'm also a pilot for JetBlue on the Airbus 321 based out of New York. I live in Chicago, but growing up in New York on Long Island, I suffered from the same affliction that most people who fell in love with aviation did. That would be the craning of the neck syndrome as aircraft flew overhead. I lived right under the VOR 22 left approach path for JFK, and they were passing over probably at about 1,800 feet. And so my neck started craning from the time that I was in a stroller, and that followed me all the way through to getting into aviation via that love and affliction, if you will, and going on to a university down in Florida that will not be named here at UND, and then moving up through the airlines as well. So thank you all for having us here. Good morning.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ryutaro Yoshihara. I'm a captain on 900 with Endeavor Air, based in New York. I went to UND, graduated in a 16 winner. Long time ago now. Did a CA5 stuff 2 years and left Grand Forks 2018. I'm representing today PAPA, Asian Pilot Association. Today, I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so impressed by students, putting everything together here. So, good job.
Hi, I'm Eric Hendrick. I'm the Director of Pilot Outreach at Delta Airlines. And for all of our UND, wonderful people here, that's Propel. That's part of my responsibility. So you guys done a wonderful job. My story started as a kid, just like anyone else. I was born with the bug. Never wanted to be a police or fireman or anything. Just wanted to be a pilot. So I was fortunate enough to fly for the Navy. Then I was fortunate enough to fly for 2 other carriers before this one, which was AirTran and Southwest. And then I was fortunate enough to retire early. And then someone woke me up and said, we don't want you to retire, come back to work. So I came back to work with Delta Airlines in this capacity. And it's a wonderful capacity because I get to work with such great young people like yourself and to discover and encourage the next generation of airline pilots. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
So you are all amazing examples of what it means to be involved. And so the first question we'll get started with is, why was it important for each of you to step up to the role that you currently occupy?
I'm not sure why it was important for me specifically to fill this role, but I know why I wanted to be in this capacity. I think every job I had, every task I was given kind of led me to this role. And I think that I found my niche in aviation when I started trying to share this industry with the next generation, and especially this underserved communities in our country. I think that exposure to this industry is underutilized by families, schools, counselors, unless you really have some sort of connection to aviation, you may not even think of it as a possibility, and it can really change families' standings, your life, your exposure to the world. And I wanted just to broaden kids' understanding of what this industry is and how they could be a part of it.
So I was exposed to aviation as a very young child, but when I went to my high school counselor back in 1990 and I told her that I wanted to be a pilot, she laughed at me. And I'm trying to like put it in perspective of the 1990s, the 80s. She looked at me, and I'm wearing really tall heels. I'm 5'2.5", maybe 5'3", so I'm 5 feet tall. And I wear glasses. I obviously am wearing my contact lenses today. And she wasn't aware of general aviation. And even though we knew about Amelia Earhart and all those other women, they were in my encyclopedia of these women from a long ago era. And I had never met a female pilot, much less a Latina pilot. So whenever I made social media posts, I always get pushback from a certain segment of the population telling me I'm ignorant and I didn't do my research. Well, Avianca, which is the Colombian carrier, they hired a female pilot back in 1959, but she was German. They wouldn't hire any Colombian women. In 1997, they finally hired one Colombian woman at Avianca. And I lived in the United States, and I had never seen a female pilot. I'd never seen a Latina pilot. Representation matters. If you can see it, you can be it. If you can see it, you can achieve it. There's so many things. There's so many different ways of saying that. Representation matters. And what I want to do with the Latino Pilots Association, I want to be that representative to other Latinos and other Latinas and anyone that identifies non-binary Latinx, to be able to see us in these positions of leadership and know that they can be a pilot or whatever they desire to be in the aerospace industry. So that's one of my biggest motivating factors of stepping up to these leadership positions and doing these panels and going on media and saying, look at me, you can do this. This is an opportunity for you. And it's unfortunately still stigma and obstacles that we have to overcome for at least the underrepresented minoritized groups, marginalized groups in the United States, for them to understand that this is a possibility for them to come into the aviation industry and to become pilots, to become engineers, to become whatever it is that they want to be in the aviation industry. It's not just pilots. We support doctors, our AMEs that give us our medicals, lawyers, everything. So, thank you.
Kind of following what Claudia just said, inspiration comes in so many different ways, and whether that be from a TikTok star to do a fabulous dance or to do some silly challenge, we're all inspired by people who came before us, or even people who we think are ahead of us in our own personal development. And there was inspiration on the stage in the introductions that were made by the student leaders here at UND, representing all of the different minority groups that are so proudly supported here on this campus. And inspiration for me came from LGBTQ individuals who went through years and years of keeping their lives under or behind a curtain, if you will. They weren't allowed to live openly and authentically, especially in the aviation space. Talking about their personal lives outside of work. One of the many things that is talked about immediately when you step onto any flight deck is those immediate cliche conversations of where do you live, where do you commute from, oh, you've got a wedding ring on, what does your wife do? That's the first thing that's often said to me. And I have to immediately say, oh, well, actually my husband does this. Or I have to say my partner does this before, or my boyfriend. And that is a very difficult conversation that luckily we are at a place now where those conversations can be had on the flight deck. And they can be had in training environments, in aviation. But before that, they couldn't be had. And I'm inspired by those before me who dealt with those tough times, who were not able to be their authentic selves and also sharing a passion for aviation, which was the common bond that brought those same two people to that very place on a flight deck. So those things inspired me to step into leadership roles within NGPA, to meet other people just like me who had a harder road than I did, and it made me know that I had to do things and take on activities and endeavors and obstacles that would make the path for those alongside of me and after me a lot easier. And that is why I got involved with NGPA back in 2008. That is why I rose into leadership roles with our Industry Expo event in 2014, and then moving into the president's role, because I was inspired by those before me. And now I continue to do it because I'm inspired by those alongside of me and those who I know are the future leaders. The amazing things that people are doing on this campus. I just walked to the restroom and I saw the Pride Room that is over here in this student union, a safe space for LGBTQ people here on this campus. That also inspires me. I took pictures of it. I'm going to share it with our NGPA leadership. I'm going to share it with our membership. That inspires me to continue to volunteer my time, to continue to travel from event to event, to ensure that that path, that road continues to be less bumpy, if you will. And folks who identify as LGBTQ can continue to live proudly, live authentically, but most important, do what they love doing, and that's fly aircraft.
To me personally, I guess growing up, it's always my passion about diversity and the social justice area. That was my personal passion. So not thinking about aviation industry, that was my passion growing up. And it kind of moved that passion into my field and thinking about, okay, what can I do with my knowledge and experience and passion in my particular industry? And that was, chip in a little bit what I can do with Papa. So that's what I'm doing. And the big reason I want to do, work with Papa and the other organizations for, DEI culture and whatnot is I got my 2 kids now. They're half Asian, half white. And then thinking about them like, okay, they're going to have to deal with those kind of identity crisis / not being represented in an area they want to go into, right? And I just want to do something I can do to, like you're saying, like represent wherever I can, and so that the kids, in elementary school or middle school, whatever, they can look at me and like, hey, if he can do it, I can do it, So yeah, that's why I want to do stuff like this.
The bad part about sitting on this end, all the good stuff is gone by the time it gets here. No, but it's all very important. I'll start with my 121 aviation. When I was hired by AirTran Airways back in 2000, I was the 4th black pilot hired there on the property. And I don't necessarily think sometimes it's by design. It's just people at that time tended to hire what they saw that looked like them, most comfortable with them. So I got involved. I started out volunteering. Like everyone here on the stage has a reason why they got into this, whether it was a innate passion or whether they saw a need. Mine was a little bit of both. So I started volunteering, doing those things. And then a little further down the road, they started paying me to do it, but that's not a big deal. And a little further down the road, I actually became the manager of the entire program. So there was some success there. And when I must say, okay, and so then when we were purchased by Southwest Airlines, again, I said I was number 4. It was a small company, but when we were purchased, there were 62 African Americans and about 80 women on the property. And I'm very happy to say that if someone doesn't take the initiative to start that, that won't happen. And that may need to be the case that you'll have to do in your career as well, as everyone on the stage has done. And so there's also a little bit of sacrifice that everyone on the stage has taken. If you are a line pilot and you decide that you want to do these type of things, oftentimes there's a financial consequence to it as well, okay? Because you have to take your off time or you're taking positions that are outside of what the contract or something may pay you. So there's a devotion that we have for this as well, okay? But to echo this thing and just try to wrap it all up is that if you see a need, fill it. That's the best way to do it, okay? If you see that you're underrepresented, bring it up, talk about it, and then have a solution. If you just can go about your way every day and complain, you're not solving anything. Everyone on the stage here are people who came to the situation with solutions, and we'll continue to do that.
Absolutely. So as we talk about, even 10 years ago, there was a massive difference in the culture in our industry. So how has the culture of our industry changed as you've progressed in your career? And what sort of progress do you still really want to see?
So I think we have come a long way in 10 years especially. I can remember earlier in my career when I started to have kids, and I had never worked with a woman who had a family before, and the majority of the people that I worked with were men who had wives at home that were raising the children. And so, you know, one of you guys talked about keeping things hidden, right? So my inclination was not to share that I had children with any of my bosses for fear that they would think I was not as committed to my role or being in the industry as my male counterparts. And then there was one woman who came to work in my organization, and she had 3 kids, and she was very clear with her limits right from the get-go. She knew her worth, and she just said, you know, my kids have this at this time, so on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm gonna be leaving at this time. And I thought it was like so refreshing to see somebody that knew their value enough to set the limits. And so that really changed how I went about everything related to the work-life balance that kind of doesn't exist all the time. So I think now we are much more open as an industry, and I think the pandemic actually facilitated this openness of who you are and, you know, what your family life looks like, because you really can't hide that on Zoom. And so you know, you're going to see kids popping in, or pets or cats in the, you know, in the frame, and I just think that humanizes us as an industry, which I think is incredibly important. But obviously there's a lot of work to do still. You know, we know what the stats are in terms of diversity in our industry, and there's so much opportunity to keep expanding on where we are right now. I'd love to see more representation of women in certain career fields in the C-suite, for example. I'd love for us to feel like we don't have to choose one or the other. We don't have to put our career on hold while we're raising children. We can keep progressing. And this gives me hope. I think you guys are so dedicated and proactive in what you want this industry to look like. You know, events like this, which, you know, I'm trying to think back when I was in college, would I have even thought I had the bandwidth to do this and to go to school? So kudos to everybody for putting this on, but it really gives me hope that you will not tolerate the status quo, and you want more from this industry, and it's gonna happen.
My goodness, when I think about 10 years ago, it seems it's like a lifetime ago. So growing up, I tried to hide that I was a child of immigrants as desperately as I could, because I just wanted to fit in. I very much worked on not having any kind of accent when I spoke English so that you couldn't tell. And to me, and I'm ashamed to admit this because it really hurt my parents. To me, the biggest compliment was when people would say, "Oh, wow, you don't have an accent at all. I had no idea that you spoke Spanish. I had no idea." Because I had seen having that accent, the pain that it brought to my parents, not the pain, but, you know, sometimes the humiliation of how people would treat my parents. And then I internalized that and just thought being Latina is bad. Liking Colombian food is bad. I was the child of quarter pounders with cheese and French fries because I just wanted to fit in so desperately with that American dream or that American ideal. And so thinking about 10 years ago, I worked for an airline that was based out of the Southeast. It was a regional carrier in the Atlanta area. And having captains tell me that they had no idea that, you know, I spoke Spanish, or they would hear me speaking Spanish to my parents. And you could see the subtle shift. They knew there was something different about me. They knew there was, you know, obviously I don't fit into that American ideal. But because of the way I spoke, they were just kind of like, oh, and then they would hear me speak Spanish, like, oh. You know, and they would say pretty, you know, ethnically racist things and disparaging things like, oh, did you guys swim across the Rio Grande? It's like, well, no, because we're from Colombia. We actually took an airplane here. You know, and I would immediately become defensive and tell them how my dad joined the Army in 1966, knowing that the draft was coming because they had told him that he could become an American citizen. But I was using that as a defense against the barrage of, you know, just discriminatory remarks that were coming towards me. And then it was always the, well, you guys did it the right way. You're okay, you did it the right way. And I'm like, everyone is coming here for the same thing, to be able to live a life that is fruitful, that is peaceful, that is loving. And it was just one of those, and then I'm also ashamed to admit it, that I wouldn't say anything. It was cooperate and graduate. I just wouldn't stand up for myself, wouldn't stand up for my family, wouldn't say anything, because it was so much easier to just be quiet and just get along than say anything. And then something snapped, and all of a sudden, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I started standing up for myself. And you know, for years, I had the reputation of being the really laid-back first officer. She's awesome, this, that, and the other, and to where you can't fly with her. You know, she's, you know, this whatever political leaning, blah, 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 B word, and, you know, my reputation started going down the tanks because people didn't want to fly with me because I became outspoken. But the flip side of that was I didn't care anymore, and I felt so much better about myself. So thinking about, you know, and I'm very specific in the 2012, and you know, we're in 2022, thinking about my life in 2012, in these years, since it has changed dramatically. We now identify those microaggressions when people say, oh, you sound American. That's a microaggression, and you can stand up and say, well, what do you mean by that? And I have this wonderful friend, her name is Dawn Cook. She is she's the founder of the Female Aviators Sticking Together. And she works at Delta Airlines. And she has this acronym called STOP, to stop those microaggressions, to stop those, racially insensitive remarks or outright racist remarks. And it's stare at the person, and then you talk and say, what do you mean by that? Can you please explain that to me? And it's amazing what happens when you deal with these things, that people look at you and they're like, oh, well, what I meant was, because now you're putting the onus, and that's the onus on them to explain their racist remark or ethnically disparaging remark or whatever it may be, or misogynistic remark. And there's been a lot of misogyny in the industry in years past as well, and I've dealt with that. And but in my head, it just all comes together into this, because it's very hard to separate when they've made, ethnically disparaging remark to, oh, you fly pretty well for a woman. It just all gets rolled up into one. And the P is your power. You can't let them take your power away, and that's what was happening a lot 10 years ago. I was letting people take that power away from me, and it was draining. So now, looking at my life since then, things have changed dramatically. We are no longer putting up with those misogynistic remarks, those racist remarks, those ethnically disparaging remarks or discriminatory remarks. We're standing up for ourselves now. We're saying it's wrong. And you can either change your attitude so we can work together, or now that I'm a captain, it's like, and I haven't had that happen since I've been a captain. I set the tone, and it's really nice. But in years past, I've said, hey, if we can't figure out a way to get along, don't worry, I'll just pull myself off the trip and explain to, professional standards at the Airline Pilots Association why I can't do this anymore, why I can't fly with you. And usually that would, oh, no. We can work together. Okay, we talk about weather, puppies, kittens, and babies. That's it. And I know I'm simplifying, and it is very hard to work in that environment, but it's so important to stand up for ourselves and speak our truths. And as Brian so eloquently put it, live our authentic lives. And our authentic lives is my Latinidad, my Colombianism, my parents immigrated here for a reason. And that's, thinking about that in the last 10 years, it has improved. As Allison said, we have a long way to go. But I have hope because of panels like this and organizations that are coming together and standing up and representing all of our interests. So thank you.
Inclusivity in action on stage. I just have to mention something really quick. Allison, when you were talking about Zoom calls and families popping up, I appreciate you mentioning pets. Oh, yeah. Allison has seen my dog on many a Zoom call, so you looked at me for that, and so thank you. That's inclusivity in action right there. And the only B word I can think for you, Claudia, is boss, because you are a boss in all the things I've gotten to see you do over the years and work with you. So she's a boss. You can call her that from now on. Continuing on, just really quick, the changes in the industry, I would say that visibility, exposure, and perception definitely drives organic change. And there has been such a greater amount of visibility for people of color, for different minority groups, for LGBTQ people in aviation. And that is that larger amount of exposure for people who may not have been okay with it before, or maybe still not are internally okay with it now, has definitely driven change in flight deck environments, in workplace environments, in aviation as a whole. People have become less comfortable to be inappropriate, if you will, and that definitely helps move things. That doesn't fully change the intrinsic problem, but it definitely moves things a bit and makes spaces a little bit more comfortable for people in aviation who might have to do exactly what Claudia said, have conversations about themselves that should never be a conversation piece. Your ethnicity and your background should not be a conversation piece. Being a female should not be a conversation piece. Being a person of color, being from a different ethnic group, being LGBTQ, it should not be a main conversation piece. There shouldn't have to be talks about that. Unless that talk is leading towards positive change in that specific environment, and they are celebrating the person you are because of something maybe they have witnessed, it should never be a conversation piece of, oh, wow, you have no accent. Like, why are we even talking about that? That shouldn't be a thing. Oh, you fly well for, you fly okay for a female. That should never be a thing. So the continued exposure, the continued visibility for these different groups is definitely driving that change over the past 10 years. And hopefully it's change that takes a greater hold on people, again, who maybe do not fully embrace and accept different minority groups in aviation. I think it's going to be a continued gradual change, but the past 10, 15, 20 years has seen leaps and bounds difference for all of these groups in aviation, and just excited to be a part of that, excited to live it, and excited to continue to work for greater acceptance across aviation.
So past 10 years, I moved here from Japan 10 years ago. So I don't have much of a reference timeline before that. But when I moved here as a student, there are not much of Asian students on campus. So it's always like, hey, do you know so-and-so? And this Asian kid over there, I'm like, I don't. You know, only because we're Asian, I don't know each other. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, and then like they'll be like, oh yeah, are you Kim? I'm like, no, I'm not. So stuff like that used to happen, right? And then like every single beginning of semester, in the class call outs, and then they all go like, okay, this name Ryutaro. I'm like, nope, that's not my name. So every single class had to do that in class. So that was my first kind of like encounter of, oh, hey, I'm like a little different, and I have to like kind of live in that little, you know, Asian thing that they created that I'm not. So that was 10 years ago, and I think for personally, Papa, there started 2017. That was only 5 years ago. That has been impacting my life and other Asian community heavily, right? So. Like I said, when I started there, probably a handful of Asian students, but now apparently there are like 50 to 100 attendants for Papa Club or whatever they have here. That's a huge improvement on campus here at UND, so that's good to hear. And moving forward, the Papa is growing. We're doing a lot more events like this, participating in all the events that we can be involved in. Doing in a conference we just did this July. We started, doing that more to represent Asian community in aviation. So, in my circle, there's only hope there, and we just have to keep working.
Okay, again, what everyone there said. But let me give you just a small twist on this. In general, pilots, aviation, the aviation industry, in general, we are risk-averse people. And whenever you're dealing with risk-averse people, you're dealing with people who do not like to change. And change is slow, and you have to, continue to fight for whatever that change may be. Let me give you another example to help you think about it. Everything we're speaking on stage today, we're really talking, this is a safety issue when you have issues such as this. I was in aviation when CRM was introduced, Crew Resource Management, okay? And you should have heard the kicking and screaming across the industry about the captains who, it's my airplane, you do what it was horrible, okay? It was horrible. And here you had these young people, that was me at the time, now I'm the old guy, but we had these young people at the time who embraced the CRM thing to say, we have evidence of these issues causing crashes, killing people, because it was a safety issue. And they continued to kick and scream, but guess what happened? The safety and the FAA and the industry continued to embrace and continue to push CRM. Now, it's to the point that we don't think about it. It's just what we do. My second month in the airline industry, there were some legacy carriers back in the day that were the epitome of captain's authority. And one of those carriers, I don't mind calling the name around anymore, was Eastern Airlines. And I flew with a lot of Eastern Airline pilots. And I had been online for about 2 months, and a captain gets in the aircraft late, and he said to me, okay, I know y'all into that CRM, and then he used an expletive, but this is my airplane, we're gonna do what I say. So I had to make a decision, not one that was gonna be too abrasive, but I just said, well, I tell you what, I'm gonna use CRM, and if that makes you uncomfortable, I think you should replace me. I didn't say I was gonna leave. I said, if that makes you uncomfortable, you should replace me. It comes to standing up, as people have said on the stage. But why do I bring up those situations? We do not think about CRM anymore. It is part of what we do. Me personally, I'm sure a lot of people on this panel, we all have talked about how things have gotten better. We are moving towards a point in this industry, not tomorrow, not next year, but we're moving towards a point where what you look like and who and how you live your life just will not be important. Because the aircraft, as Karen and I were talking earlier, does not care. Gender is, the aircraft does not care what your political affiliation is, and then nor does the environment. It's a safety issue. So as you go out in your career and you are dealing with these things that make your work environment not so comfortable, also understand this is a safety issue if we don't get this. And everyone on the stage has our life challenges and the things that we've gone through. But just understand, we're risk-averse people. We're getting there. It will happen, but we have to keep our foot on the gas. Okay, we have to keep our foot on the gas. Start down here this time. I'm running out of.
We will start with you, because you just touched on CRM, and each of you have touched on this in some way or another. And so what advice would you give for especially people like myself and my colleagues who are about to be entering this industry and have to interact not only on the flight deck, in the boardroom, wherever it might be? How would you navigate conversations that come up that maybe we don't want to have, but that become the centerpiece of our conversation, whether or not we want it to?
You start with.
Well, we'll start with you. Yeah, we'll start on that side.
So everyone on this panel has had those conversations. We've already established that. I've had them as well. My friend doesn't, he understands how it is when people say, hey, do you know Eric Poole? Well, why would you ask me, do I know Eric Poole? Hey, do you know Joey? Well, why would you ask if I know Joey? Okay, some of those things are very innocent, and we get that. But how do you have those conversations? You have the conversations by being just very honest and open. And sometimes a little sometimes I give people an off-ramp as well, okay? Give them an off-ramp sometimes. When people ask me, do you know Eric? I was like, why do you ask me if I know Eric? Does Eric play golf like I do? You know, I'll give you an off-ramp, okay? And that's a personal thing, how you navigate that. I would navigate it differently than Brian. I would navigate it differently than Allison. But you have to be comfortable in how you vocalize what's wrong, okay? You have to be comfortable with that. I can't give you my personality, but what I'll leave you with is that there is no excuse for not vocalizing it, okay? There's no excuse for not. So determine who you are and internalize how you present yourself, and then have the courage to say something when it happens.
It's a hard question, I think. You know, it's you don't have to hide. It's like I have an accent, right? I don't have to hide my accent, right? To kind of blend in, to be like, we don't want to talk about Japanese stuff, and I'm gonna try and hide my accent. No, you don't have to do that. You just have to be you. And if they have, for some reason, have an issue with it, like you're saying, just be honest and say what you have. Because like whatever you are, you can chime in the team, and your experience and background skills would benefit the team that's you're there. So you gotta be just confident that you're qualified to be there, and you got something to bring in the team. That's why you're there. So you just have to be authentic yourself and be confident, I guess. As far as the conversation goes, I do have a lot of conversations about Japan. Whenever I mention about my name or I'm from Japan, oh yeah, do you like this anime? No, I don't. But but there, like you can just bring that in and just like, I guess that point you can kind of, I don't know, like segue into like whatever you want to talk about. And then that's your field, right? Like you take initiative and start a conversation. And so that's a good way to break the ice a lot of times with my captain when I was a captain of FO. So I definitely use that as my tool to build a report and stuff like that. So,
in terms of recommendations, we live now in a world of instant gratification. Things are available at our fingertips. Information is available. Communication is available. And I believe that is driving a want for immediate change. So I beg you all, as you head into the industry, to be tolerant. People of different minority groups, over the years, we have begged and demanded tolerance. So when you run into people who you may have to have awkward conversations with because they do not exactly align with your way of thought, be tolerant of that. You don't have to accept their way of thought. You just need to be tolerant of it, because that will ultimately lead to an opportunity for positive exchange, positive communication, and hopefully positive change. You're not going to win every battle, and that's okay. That is just part of the road that you will lead throughout your career. That's part of the road that you will lead throughout your relationships, both friendships, love relationships, and everything. Tolerance is definitely key, and as we continue to have such amazing technology at our fingertips and the ability to spread information and have quick results, you're not always going to run into that in the workplace, and you have to be ready to spend the work, put in the time to lead to those elements of positive change. And when you hit a barrier where you cannot get through to someone, you cannot get them on the path that you'd like to get them on, go back to doing what you know how to do. Do your job well, and you'll get them next time in the next conversation and next opportunity you have. And if it ends up being something that causes you to feel unsafe, not uncomfortable. Feeling uncomfortable is not a bad thing, but if it gets to a point of being unsafe, then you can escalate it in other ways, or lean on people around you. Find a mentor. Maybe you will encounter this person again in your career, and maybe you can gain some knowledge on how to best handle that experience in the future. So tolerance is key. It has worked for people, for minority groups for years, and it has led to the positive change that we all get to experience now in the industry.
and I'm just going to have to echo what everyone has said, the tolerance portion. For me, it's, I also do work for the Airline Pilots Association, and I'm a part of the President's Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And what we find most of the times, and I say most of the times, 90%, maybe 95% of the times, when people ask certain things, it's out of ignorance. They don't mean for it to sound the way it comes out. However, 5 to 10% of it is with the intent of harming. So you have to make that differentiation. Is it out of a place of ignorance and curiosity, or is it out of a place of harm and to embarrass and humiliate you? So that's one of the things that you have to differentiate. And my always go-to, and believe me, I fly with first officers who are just completely on the exact opposite of the spectrum politically of where I am. But we find commonalities, and that's where I always go to, is find the commonalities, find what makes us, what brings us together. And when you do that, it makes for a much easier flight deck experience. And sometimes, like I said, it's about puppies. And that is the only thing you may have in common with this person is your pets. And that's okay. And one of the hardest lessons I had to learn is not everyone is going to like me. And that kind of hurts my feelings. Like, why don't you like me? I'm a really nice person. But it's okay, because I don't like everybody. And I don't have that same reaction. Like, why don't I like them? No, I don't like you. That's it. And that's okay. You have to be okay as, as Ryan put it, with being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. Feeling as though the safety of the flight is in jeopardy, that's a completely different thing. And that is when, I would say, yes, absolutely escalated through your union's professional standards. And then if you don't get any satisfaction from that, then remove yourself. Or, as someone else said it, hey, you can remove me from this trip. And more often than not, it gets resolved, and you run checklists, you're quiet at cruise, but the safety of the flight isn't jeopardized. But it really, for me, it always comes down to, find what we have in common. Find what we can talk about without touching any of these other, issues to, have the safest outcome for our flight.
Yes, you're right. This seat is tougher. I echo everything they said. I'm coming at it from like a slightly different experience because I'm not in the flight deck, right? And so my regret, if I look back on my early career experience, was laughing when I didn't think things were funny. And I did that as a defense mechanism to try to be part of the group and the team and fit in. But the laughter was often at my expense or the expense of women, right? Because these older white guys thought it was funny to make jokes about women in business or women in general, or even worse, there were some really terrible experiences that I had that they thought would be funny for some odd reason. But I didn't speak up or do anything because I so desperately wanted to keep my career moving forward and not be the person that rocks the boat. So I don't think that I probably would look back and say, oh, I should have raised my hand and been that person that constantly was pointing out how awful these people were at times. But I would say, find your footing. Don't laugh at things that aren't funny. There's nothing wrong with not being part of what people find funny that actually is never going to be funny. But find your footing. You don't always have to be the loudest voice in the room. But I do agree that when safety is involved, that is really when you do need to find your voice. And while you may not be able to bring it to that person at that time, there are so many avenues to lodge complaints and take things to the next level when issues are really serious.
Absolutely. I think that's all really good advice, especially because in the flight deck, you can't always walk away. You're stuck up there. But we'll shift gears a little bit as we have maybe 10 minutes left on this panel. And let's talk about some ways that you guys are rocking the boat, things that you're excited about for your organizations, and what's on the horizon for each of your respective orgs.
So we just completed Girls in Aviation Day at the end of September, 120 worldwide events, which if anybody has ever attended a Girls in Aviation Day event, you know that the kids are so excited for whatever aspect of aviation they love, or we've exposed them to things they didn't know exist. But my concern always was then we send them home and we say, well, we'll see you next year. And we hope that they stay as passionate about aviation as they were when they attended the event. So starting in 23, we are creating a program called Aviation for Girls, and it's a year-round program. Utilizes the app that we created during the pandemic that we just updated, but it also gives them touch points throughout the year. So we expand our magazine content, our social media presence. I have young kids, and you meet them where they are, which right now is TikTok and YouTube, right? And so we really have to start appealing to them where they get their information. And in June, we created a youth membership category, 18 and under, which is completely free, so they get access to all the benefits of a WAI membership without having to spend any money, because we want young people to find this industry as amazing as we do, and we need them to get on board earlier. And we know we lose girls in the middle school time frame. They start kind of disassociating themselves with being good at STEM fields, and aviation to me is the hook to keep them engaged in STEM education, and so that's just one thing that we're working on that I'm really excited about, because we need many more young people to get into this industry.
So with the Latino Pilots Association, we're undergoing a lot of changes. One of the changes that we're probably going to do in the next couple of years is probably change it to Latin professionals in aerospace to make it more inclusive of everybody. Pilots, air traffic controllers, engineers, whatever their desire is. But we were a very small organization, and as we're taking over, membership is going up. And one of the things that we did was trying to reduce some of the financial barriers, because a lot of the marginalized groups do face those financial obstacles. And so we created a student membership for the students to be able to join at a reduced rate. A couple of other things that we're doing is ALAS, and ALAS in Spanish means wings, and for us, ALAS stands for the Academy of Latinos in Aviation Sciences, and we're going to have our first program with JetBlue in New York City next spring, and it's going to be a 5-day program, and it's going to bring together teenagers from 13 to 17 or 18, and we're going to take them through, JFK Airport. They're going to meet pilots. They're going to go into the maintenance hangar. They're basically going to get a taste of what aviation is, culminating in an introductory flight. And we're going to be, our very first one next year, we're going to be taking notes of what went well and what we could have done better. And we want to expand that across the United States. And then from there, we also want to do a smaller ALAS for children in elementary, middle schools, because as Allison said, we've discovered that especially for, it seems like all young women, and it was Dr. Rebecca Luty that did this did this survey, and she's done the research on it, and she's with the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Got it. And she realized and she discovered that, yes, middle school girls end up disassociating with STEM, so we're trying to fill that gap, keep them engaged. We're not as big as the other organizations yet, so we're still in that, growing in baby steps. So we really are hoping to come up with more programs to introduce to the Latinx community, to those young people, because we know by research that when you introduce them at a very young age, there's a good possibility that they will continue seeking out positions within the aviation industry. So those are a few of the things that Latino Pilots Association is doing. And also growing our collegiate chapters. We're really excited that, our first collegiate chapter was in a Florida school, and our second one was with UND, and our third one is with Inter-American in Puerto Rico is our third collegiate chapter. So we're slowly expanding that, and we're really excited to see what the future holds for us.
For NGPA, 32 years of history now for the organization, and in the past 2 years, since 2020, we have almost fully doubled in size in terms of our active membership. So growth has been something that we all knew was coming. We didn't expect it to happen in a time where we thought we were going to shrink. But we actually grew exponentially, almost doubling in size. And that, of course, comes with more expectation. Expectation to show up to events, expectation to provide services, expectation to be a leader in the LGBTQ space, especially in aviation. And I'm just so proud of our membership, of our volunteers for answering that call. Like Claudia said, for LPA, our university chapter program has grown incredibly. The leadership that is here at UND and across all of our other university chapters has been amazing. Helped much in part to a gentleman who's sitting right here, Dristan, who is leading our university chapters, and Charlie from right here at UND, leading our university chapter program and helping that expansion to really cultivate a love for aviation and providing that safe space in aviation for LGBTQ people who are growing up and have that same passion for aviation, but just worry if it's a place for them because they're LGBTQ. So very proud of that. Our scholarship program, we're about to award our $1 millionth this year in terms of scholarships, and in the 2022 season alone for our scholarship program, we're giving away $356,000 in this calendar year. That goes from when we first started our scholarship program giving away only $4,000 to just last year doing $156,000. We've more than doubled that heading into 2022. We're spreading our wings a bit as well, and we landed in the middle of the country in Cedar Rapids, Iowa this past June to kick off Pride Month with a group with Cedar Rapids Pride to support their very first Pride Parade and host an actual aviation day at the airport where we saw over 1,200 local community youth come out and touch, see, feel airplanes, understand that there are possibilities in the aviation space and that the center of the country does not mean LGBTQ people are excluded from aviation. It means that you are supported and you have a place and there's an organization here that can help support your dreams and give you a family that you choose if you might be turned away from your own. Just all new things that we've done that are really changing the dynamic of this organization and making sure that people feel included everywhere. We have our mantra of equal, authentic, and respected everywhere, and we are putting a big underline on everywhere to ensure that not just in stereotypically LGBTQ towns and cities, that acceptance lies all over the country, and we continue to plan to continue to land in different places to make that known. And one of the coolest things I think we've done this past year is we've invested back into our membership. Mental health has such a problem across the US, it's such a problem across the world. And NGPA has always had our NGPA Cares line. It was a confidential email system you could go into, and we had 4 specially trained volunteers who could give you some advice and be a little bit more of a confidential peer mentor to our members. We've taken the next step, and we've invested quite a bit of money into a professional mental health service for all NGPA members. All NGPA members can now reach out to our NGPA Cares team, and you're connected with an actual mental health professional, licensed and certified for mental health issues that you might be afraid to bring up with someone outside of the aviation space, someone outside of your NGPA membership. So to focus on the mental health of our members is something that we're very happy to start doing, continue to do, and to expand because we know that that is definitely a key and a barrier to some people entering aviation because of their fears over their own mental health concerns that might be disqualifying. So we are working to build a bridge, get over that, if you will, and make sure that our members are supported in every place that they need that support. Sorry, I felt like that was a rah-rah moment.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of things. Our leadership team, they're trying to make up, stuff to do as an organization. But a few things I want to mention is we do have our scholarships growing from PAPA. So that's something that they're very passionate about in the leadership team. And also, like I mentioned, we did our first annual conference in July in Vegas. That was amazing. We're planning on that, same thing, same location in May. So that's something we're all working towards for this year, I guess, next year. And then one of the things that we do is super cool is a mentorship program. We do have a mentorship within a PAPA organization. So if you join a PAPA and have a mentor, in the same background, and if you want to hear how they navigated in the aviation industry, we offer that to all the members as well. So like you guys saying, we have a lot of college students interested in our organization. So started UND Papa right here, and the party is over there as well, and Riedel, and then we expand into other campuses as well. Personally, I try to do school visits. OBAP does a wonderful job in the school visits, so kind of look to their models and trying to do what they have done. And so I visited a few Japanese schools in the U.S. and share visions and my stories, whatnot, to hopefully inspire them to become a pilot. So that's about it.
Okay, so for Delta Airlines, I'm not going to give away the secret sauce because Aviate's in the room. I don't want them to know. So we're creating pathways for the industry. I joke we have friendly banter about Aviate and Cadet and 225, but we want all airlines to do well. We want all airlines to have pathways that we can help our industry partners. We've had a meeting with Allison. We've had a meeting with OBAP. We've established a relationship with Papa, our latest one, and Brian, has an avenue to Delta. I'm sure if you don't, you have one now. Okay. Likewise. All right. So we're being very intentional about our programs. Some of them are relationships building. Most of them are templates that Delta Airlines is building to achieve the goal of having diversity, equity, and inclusion in our company.
Outstanding. As much as I'd love to continue asking my questions, I think we'll throw it over to any questions that people have in the crowd as we start to run short on time. So anybody have a question that they'd like to ask of this panel?
Has there been any trying to start some of these groups in NGPA maybe at Delta or at United or at, so within your airline, do you have meetings or even just coffee of some of our minority groups? That might be a good way to, for everybody to meet one another, to maybe outreach for other people that are coming in, just to get a little bit more awareness. Has there been any thought about doing anything like that?
It's a great question. We did talk about that last night. So basically the question is having organizations like LPA, OBAP, NGPA, not just at the at the national level or the collegiate level, but at the company level. So it's a great question.
So I know for us, just most recently at our event in Provincetown, United was present and they held a social for all United Airlines employees, no matter what role you fill within United. There was a social that was held at our Provincetown event on the side of all the NGPA events that were going on. Delta, in working with Nina Van de Steeg and Beth Poole on the team in pilot recruiting and DEI, they have recently reached out about identifying NGPA members who are Delta employees so that Delta can start hosting events. We don't share membership information, but we are happy to send out something to our members to self-identify, hey, Delta's looking to meet NGPA members in Atlanta. Would you self-identify as an NGPA member who's a Delta employee? They would like to know who you are. They'd like to feature you. They would like to do events with you near their headquarters or near some of their other bases. So some of that is beginning, Linda, and hopefully that will expand. Obviously, that all takes time. It all takes money. And that is something that some pieces are more prevalent than others, but time is definitely the constricting portion for a lot of companies right now as we're in such an unprecedented time of hiring. So definitely things that are being worked on and initiated, but the ideas we were talking about at the table before, definitely something that would be great on a grander scale across all of our minority organizations to really partner with our corporate sponsors and our corporate partners to build that inclusivity at each specific company for all of our groups together as opposed to separately.
And I'll echo that, but I'll also say that we all are aligned with the same objective, which is a diverse and inclusive industry. And so there is no feeling that, oh, I want to keep my members to myself, right? And so I think as organizations, we can do a better job of trying to have co-located, co-hosted events at at industry conferences and expos that we, share membership at. I think that would be something really great to pursue, and also to share the cost, because receptions at anything that has a convention center in its name are like ridiculous. But WAI also has chapters that are located at in cities where one employer has like the stronghold, right? So we may have a chapter in Seattle, and the majority of those chapter members are Boeing employees, for example. So, but like Brian said, Boeing often asks us, who are our employees that are your members? And so we do the same thing as Brian just said, because a lot of times they don't know everybody within their organization that is a member of our organization. They get 5 member reps or whatever through their corporate membership, and then everybody else has to join themselves. So we as organizations can do a much better job of co-hosting things, I think.
Also, Delta Airlines, we're doing a complete new photo shoot for our pilot PR that will be in our entire system. And as Brian mentioned, he worked with Nina. And so Nina's on my team, and she was giving me the rundown of the photo shoot it's going to have next week. And she says, oh, by the way, and we're going to have this represented, that represented, that represented. And to some of the things that Allison and Claudia were talking about earlier, she's going to have in our photo shoot for our company nationwide 2 pregnant pilots. I, as a man, would not have thought of that. I would not, okay? But she thought of that. So we're gonna, and to show about family in the workplace, okay? And so we partner with all of our agencies here in ART, and we like to have representation from everyone, but I just want to say that even me, I wouldn't have thought of that, okay? But we're doing that. She's talks about Brian quite a bit and the influence that you give her, so we appreciate that. We went to Papa this year for their conference. We did get some names of people who would be there, and we gave them guaranteed interviews on the spot, okay? Because we want to reach out and ensure that they know that we want to be, a partner with you. So we're partnering with everyone. I have conversations with the gay community at Delta. I'm having a meeting with them coming up for our strategy going forward next year to get on their Facebook page, do some work with that. We definitely already partnering with OBAP to do some more things as their leadership changes. And we'll have more lunches with Allison as well. And next time we'll drive that Porsche.
I want the Porsche ride after the lunch. That was a bait and switch right there.
Outstanding. Anybody else have any other questions?
You are all obviously leaders of amazing organizations that we're each representing here today, but what do you recommend for student leaders here that we're not in the industry yet, or other students that might be attending right now that might be freshmen that want to take on a leadership role eventually? What do you recommend us to do to be a better leader, period, like in general?
Compassion. The greatest asset to a leader, I think, is compassion, leading with compassion. I know there was like many questions you were asking on what can you do as a leader. Don't be afraid to admit that you need help. And that is one of the things that I think a lot of leaders will sometimes, I don't know, I should just probably speak on my own. You don't want to appear weak, but the problem is when you try to do everything yourself, you start to miss things, and then you look incompetent, and that's even worse. So ask for help, and that's probably one of the best ways to get people to, rally around you is assign them tasks that maybe you're just too task saturated to do. I'm trying to think of it like the list of questions. People want to volunteer, and that's one of the things that we're changing at the LPA level is that people would want to volunteer, but unfortunately, just because we were not as a cohesive unit, we would miss people that wanted to volunteer, and you can only ask so many times before you finally just give up because your voice hasn't been heard. So make sure that you keep that list of people who want to volunteer and give them that opportunity to volunteer as well. What was the other question that I'm sorry.
So I asked about the values, and then I asked how else you can empower as a leader, like your peers and maybe like new students.
Yeah, the empowering part is also trusting them to do the job that you assign them. I think all of us as pilots can admit, and probably just in the business world as well, nothing is worse than having to deal with a micromanager that will literally dictate every single thing that you're doing. That is absolutely horrible, whether it's in the flight deck or in the boardroom. There is nothing worse than having to deal with a micromanager that just will not let you do your job. And so that's one of the things that you can do, as far as I can see, is to empower them to, let them do their job. Give them the guidelines. You have to give them strong guidelines and say, this is what we're expecting, set the expectations. And then when they're not meeting the expectations, make sure you counsel them as well as to why they didn't meet the expectations, not just say, well, we didn't like what you did. You need to be able to mentor them, counsel them. So I think those are some of the things that I can touch on as far as the leadership portion. But we have wonderful leaders that will add their experiences as well.
I think first of all, you've already demonstrated one characteristics of a leader is continuous learning, because you stood up and asked a question. Continuous learning is important. Today, this focus, and I think embedded in one of your questions, was how do you take some of these things and go forward. Today, this panel, and we were really talking about the diversity aspect of things and so forth. But I think I'm going to lean on one thing that's important to me is what Brian said earlier. Give people an opportunity to communicate with you, okay? Sometimes you can, leave a panel like this and you can walk out the room and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to punch every white man in the face. No, that's just not the case, okay? All right? Most people are good people. Most people are, they may be insensitive. Brian brought up a good point. Let's give them an opportunity to have a conversation, okay? There are very few people who are just complete jerks. They're there, but not everyone is, okay? So take these tools with you to create a better work environment. I like to caution people, do not take a lot of these things with you to go out there and change people's lives, okay? But you need to create good work environments. You need to create good environments here at your university. So continuous learning, understand that everyone is not a bad person, they just may not know, and continue to keep open lines of communications. You will solve more communicating than you will shutting down or shutting people down and fighting.
Yeah, one thing I want to say to college kids is students, sorry. What I didn't do as a student was just being involved. I just didn't do it. You know what I mean? I was busy with friends and girlfriend and all that stuff. So, but being involved in it, it doesn't cost you nothing. So definitely, that's something you could do. And as far as the leadership goes, it's a skill, I think. So just you're not gonna feel confident to do it at some point, but you do it and learning at the same time, like you're saying, continuous learning. Oh, shoot, I messed up on this one, and then learn from it, and then go on from there, and kind of tie to it. If you're senior, you should be mentoring freshmen, right? Like mentorship, that's a huge skill set for leaders. So definitely, if you're organization leaders, definitely you should take up on the mentees and kind of pass down your skills so that they can, fill your shoes after you're gone. So.
You mentioned that you're already involved in leadership, on-campus leadership of different groups and whatnot. Something that has been one of my largest learning points has probably been learn when to listen. Learn when to listen to those around you, and just listening is sometimes a form of mentorship. Allowing someone else to speak, allowing their voice to be part of the conversation, to lead, will actually reflect on how good of a leader you are personally. And not always taking the opportunity to use your voice, which is probably very strong, very knowledgeable and whatnot, but allow others to falter sometimes, allow others to succeed, because that's going to make them great leaders, because someone did that for you. Overarching over everything. I don't want anyone to walk away from this panel. We've talked about some of the worst things we've encountered. Don't think that that is where it is all the time. Just like Eric said, most people are good people. I come from a different space than some of my counterparts up here and some of you. I do not carry my minority group so visibly to everyone. I am a white male in aviation, and that is how some people approach me. Yes, I am LGBTQ, but that part does not come out until I start talking about my personal life. So I don't want to, I often apologize on different panels that I've been on, like, take this with a grain of salt for me, because I do not walk into an environment where people might have those microaggressions coming at me like crazy right away. But know that everyone is not that bad. Most experiences that I've had in my aviation career have been overwhelmingly positive. And when I have shared those pieces of my life, I've been met with nothing but being embraced, celebrated. There have been situations where I haven't been. And those are where you take the experiences that you have, the learning that you get from moments like this, and the learning that you have through those experiences in your own personal life, and that greater knowledge that you gain because of it, where you can affect positive change. So go into your careers as you depart your university life excited. Don't be ready for a fight every turn you make. Be tolerant, give grace, and be ready to represent not only yourself, but the community that you passionately serve in a way that will make the journey for the next person behind you even better than your own.
Mic drop, I'm not going to follow that.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to end this right here, but can we give an absolutely huge round of applause to these guys? All of them have volunteered their time to be here today and talking to you, and we really appreciate it, so thank you guys so much.